Okay, you can see it then. Okay. So in our last lesson, we decided to read An Indian's View of an Indian's Affair by Chief Joseph. And what you were reading was a speech. As you already know, Chief Joseph was a chief of the Indian nation known as the Nez Perce. They were moved to a reservation, and when they found gold there, even though the federal government had made a treaty already with that Indian nation, they started backpedaling because that's how the white man governments works. You know, when there's gold involved, that's the first thing. That's more important than fairness. That's more important than justice. That's more important than lives. So, you know, that settlers started coming in and prospectors into the reservation in violation of the treaty. The government did not do much to help remedy the situation, and it all ended badly. People took out guns, people started shooting, and when everything was said and done, there was a massacre, and the Nez Perce were forced into an even smaller area of what used to be their reservation. Of course, it was the area that had no gold. Chief Joseph wrote a letter to the President of the United States, to the US government, because you know that the President of the United States is the chief of the government, right? The same way that Joseph was the chief of his tribe. And he wrote a very heartfelt speech. You can see that, you know, we use different kinds of appeals when we're making a persuasion. There's the appeal to reason, and there's the appeal to emotion. Which one did he use the most?
Okay, I didn't really understand the question. Can you say it again,
okay,
please?
You know that when you are trying to persuade someone, in a lesson I said that we make appeals. And you can either make an appeal to someone's emotions, and I explained that extensively in that lesson, or you can make an appeal to reason. And that's also something that I explained. My question to you guys would be, what kind of appeal did he use the most? An appeal to reason or an appeal to emotion?
To reason.
Why?
Because he keeps stating the reason of how they should all be treated equal and why they should be. So that's why I believe he did also use appeals to emotion, but at least to me, it seems like he used more appeal to reason.
Well, you know what? While he's making appeals to reason, I would argue that he's making more appeals to emotion. He uses very emotional language. He's also pretty reasonable too, but I think that the emotions come out more forcefully in his argument. One of the things that listen to one of the things that he says, when I think of our condition, my heart is heavy. I see men of my race treated as outlaws and driven from country to country or shot down like animals. That's pretty emotional. That's highly emotional content. He begins his speech by talking about the attitude towards the empty negotiations, because you know that in order to negotiate, in order to have a treaty work, you have to make negotiations with the other part. And you can see the frustration in the very first paragraph when he says, "I have heard talk and nothing is done." So again, although that could be a fact, his choice of words clearly expresses frustration with the US government. So he says that good works do not last long unless they amount to something. So he's accusing the US government of just talking, but not doing what they're supposed to be doing. So when you read a piece that is trying to persuade, those are things that you have to keep in mind. What is this person appealing to emotions or to reason, or both? And I would argue that he's appealing to both. but more heavily towards it's a very emotional speech. It's a beautiful speech. Um, Something else that he does is that he summarizes. Sometimes people decide to like talk in a speech, and some people know when it's better to summarize. There's a part where he says, if the white man wants to live in peace with the Indians, he can live in peace. There need be no trouble. Treat all men alike. Give them the same law. Give them even a chance to live and grow. All men were made by the same great spirit chief. They are all brothers. The earth is the mother of all people, and all people shall have equal rights upon it. So instead of going point by point about every single thing that has happened, he's like making a summary of what has transpired and how they should get along. He's advocating, obviously, for fairness. Is this speech pro or con? Is he arguing in favor of something or against something?
Against.
And against what?
Against the treatment they were receiving.
I don't know. I would argue that he is arguing in favor of something instead of against. He's arguing in favor of equality, guys. He just wants equality, fairness. As I just read there in that part, he wants the law to apply to everyone equally. So his arguments are pro, not con. They are in favor of something, not against something. I mean, he's against some things, but mostly what his argument is, let's have the same rules for everyone. Let's not have different rules. So basically that is the presentation for the lesson that you had a couple of days ago. You were supposed to read. Can you see this, guys?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Today's selection is another persuasion. And it is titled Why I Wrote Persepolis. And how many of you know what Persepolis is? Any idea? No. It is Persepolis, the title is a compound word. Persepolis. You have Persepolis, and you have Persia. You know what Persia was? Did you see Aladdin?
Yes.
Say,
Well, that takes place in the Persian Empire, guys. And Persia was a very powerful and ancient civilization. And do you know what country is occupying that space today? It's a country that's in the news all the time.
¿Cuál es? ¿Qué es lo que tú estás diciendo? Me dice que no entendí bien.
Okay, question is, Persia does not exist anymore, but there's a country where Persia used to be, where Persia used to exist. Do you know what country that is today?
No.
Iran.
Iran. That is correct. Iran. Iran is in the news all the time. And Iran and the United States have a terrible relationship today. There was a time when they were friends. Persepolis, Persia, is there, and also the polis. You see, P-O-L-I-S means city. So it will be like Persian city. It's basically what it means, Persian city. It refers to modern day Iraq, Iran. And as I was telling you, there was a time when Iran had a good relationship with the United States, but then some things happened in 1979. In 1979, there was an Islamic revolution because the country was being governed by a prince or a king, and they call him the Shah of Iran. And people were living in poverty, and this guy was living a very lavish lifestyle at the expense of his people. And when you have people that are not happy in their country, and there are powerful voices, people are going to hear those, listen to those voices. And the very powerful voices of that time were the voices of the Islamic clerics, especially a guy called the Ayatollah Khomeini. And in 1979, there was a revolution. They took over the country. The Shah of Iran had to leave the country. And I don't know if you ever heard of the occupation of the US Embassy, where they had the people that worked at the embassy kidnapped for almost 2 years. Did you know that happened?
No.
They made movies out of that, guy. That was I remember I was in high school when that happened, and that was in the news all the time. You know what an embassy is, right? Okay, an embassy is like a little piece of a country in another country. And one thing that, according to international law, you should never do is step in another country's embassy. And these guys, they just ran in and they took them hostages. They were hostage for over 2 years. And since then, Iran has been an Islamic state. I believe it's the only Islamic state in the world. It's an Islamic republic. That means that the government is led by a religious junta. Okay? If that makes any sense to you. So this woman, the writer of this, Margin Satrapi, she lived through all that. And she decided to write a memoir. And she titles it Persepolis. So what you're going to read today is an interview, because people were asking her why she wrote Persepolis. Not only why she wrote Persepolis, but why did she do it the way that she did. And I would like to ask you a question. When you want to persuade someone about an idea that's important to you, how do you do it? And you should be able to answer the question easily, because you do this with your parents, I suppose, all the time.
By giving like reasons,
Can you say that again?
like by giving reasons, like good things are gonna come out of you doing something.
So you're telling me that you've never cried to persuade your parents about something, that you've never made emotional appeals or body language.
Yes.
Okay, remember, when we talk about body language, that's nonverbal communication, and you know that works. You know how that works. When we do not only use words to express ourselves, guys. As a matter of fact, most of our communication is gestures. It's nonverbal. So we use all these strategies, whether they are verbal or not, to appeal to other people. The way we move our face, the way we position our eyes, the way we hunch, or the way we stand up, all those things communicate things. Weakness, power, have pity on me. We use many different ways to persuade. Now, what way do you choose? The one that works for you. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yes.
Yes.
You're going to use the one that works. Remember that in any persuasion, the author has a purpose. There's a main purpose that you're trying to get across. There's a reason for you to engage in the persuasion. There are different techniques that you can use. For example, you can use exposition to explain or inform. You can use narration to tell about events that happen, like you're telling a story. And you use persuasion to convince others to act in a certain way. So you can write a piece of persuasion where you're trying to persuade someone and still use exposition and narration. If you remember, Chief Joseph used exposition, he used narration, and he used persuasion in his speech. He used all three of them. And Margin Satrapi is going to use all three of them also. She's going to use all these techniques to achieve her primary purpose in the interview that you're going to be reading. The reading skill strategy that you're going to be using today is questioning the text. Always ask questions when you read. You ask questions when you watch movies, don't you? You ask questions when you talk with people. You ask questions when you read. Asking a variety of questions is going to help you get more involved in the text, and it will help comprehension. I don't know how many of you talk to the TV when you're seeing a show?
Me.
Yeah.
But how many of you say, "But por qué?" Have you ever asked? You're asking like a question to a character in the TV. Do you do that?
Yes.
Why do you do that? Why?
Porque actúan bien dumb.
But you're questioning them. That means that you're engaged. Okay, and you should do the same thing when you read. You can talk to the text. Don't worry. Nobody will think you're crazy. And if they do, that's not a problem. Okay. So we should question and ask questions when we're reading, because that's going to help us get engaged. And the more engaged you are, the more you're going to understand. And that's going to sharpen your critical thinking skills. So when you're evaluating a persuasive piece of writing, you have to think about the kinds of information that are being offered. I was not very satisfied with some of the answers that I got when we were discussing the speech. And it's maybe because you were not asking the right question and you were not thinking about the information, the kind of information that was being offered. When you read a piece of persuasion, you might be expected to find an anecdote. Does anybody know what an anecdote is? Ms. Arroyo, do you know what an anecdote is?
No.
In Spanish, una anécdota. I'm sure you've heard the word. Do you know what it means?
I know the word, but not what it means.
Okay, an anecdote is when you are talking with someone and all of a sudden you tell them, you know what? One day, this happened to me and my grandma. And you tell them like a little story. That's what an anecdote is. Sometimes we use anecdotes to illustrate something that we're trying to get across to other people. Does it make sense to you, madam?
Yes.
Okay, so anecdotes is one of the things that we use. We tell like little stories. One day, this happened when you're trying to get across something. We also use examples. I'm not going to explain what an example is because you all understand what an example is. And we also make statements of fact and opinion. You know that facts can be proven. What about opinions?
They cannot be proven.
They cannot be proven, right? If you say, for example, that chocolate is the best food in the world, is that a fact or an opinion?
Opinion.
It's an opinion, but if you say that chocolate is very nutritious, would that be a fact or an opinion?
An opinion, because it's not true.
It is a fact, madam. Remember, I just said two different things. First, I said chocolate is the best food in the world. There's no way to prove that it's the best food in the world. That's very subjective. That's clearly an opinion. But if I say that chocolate is nutritious, there's a way of scientifically proving it because you can analyze the material, the ingredients of chocolate. And the dark chocolate is very nutritious. Not milk chocolate. Milk chocolate is very fattening, but the dark kind is very nutritious. And it's good too. It's the best food in the world. So when we question the text, we should be in the outlook for all these things, okay? As you read, think about Margine Satrapi and how she uses a combination of images and words to achieve her primary purpose. If you have not guessed it already, what is it that you think that Margine Satrapi wrote?
Una anécdota.
I'm sorry?
Una anécdota.
Well, no, she wrote a memoir, but what I'm asking you is, how do you think she wrote it? I mean, look at this. What is that?
A comic?
That's a comic book. Another word for comic book is graphic novel. Then you're going to see in the interview is like, why did you write it that way? Because people don't take comic books seriously. Some people think that comic books is just, you know, like the Avengers fighting against Thanos or something like that, you know, or Superman punching Brainiac. In the mindset of most people, they cannot fathom that you can address important adult themes in a comic book. And that mindset is very much American because the rest of the world does not really think that way. But she wrote about a very important subject about a very harrowing time in that country. She speaks a lot about a lot of hardships that she had to endure because not only there was the revolution, but then there was like a cultural counter-revolution where, you know, you were listening to Michael Jackson music or something like that, you could be arrested. So imagine living in a place like that. How many of you remember Happy?
Like the song?
Like the song from a few years ago, yeah. Remember it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. You know that, you know, there were a bunch of videos made around the world. People from France, people from different countries in Europe, people in Japan, people in Canada, people in Mexico, people everywhere making a video of Happy. Did you have a chance to see any of them?
Yes.
Even
Yes.
even we did one. But there were some people in Iran that made a video. Guess what happened to them?
They got arrested.
They got arrested. Were you guessing or did you know that?
I was guessing, but basing it off of what you said earlier.
Yeah, it was an educated guess. Thank you, madam. But the fact is, they were actually arrested. So as you can figure out, living in Iran has to be a lot of fun. How many of you would like to go there and live there?
Not me.
Not me, not me. Okay, so imagine talking about living in a place like that. It's a very serious matter because we're talking about your civil rights, we're talking about your freedom, liberty, all these things, free speech, the freedom to express yourself, the freedom to have your own set of beliefs, not have the government jam beliefs down your throat. And because you're writing it in comic book form, it makes it less serious. So in the interview, all that is going to come across, and she's going to be defending why she shared her experiences this way. I think I have a clip here. Persepolis is a graphic novel. It's a comic book, but it was adapted into a animated movie. And every year I show it to my students. Unfortunately, this year I can't show it to you, but you can check out this clip.
Movieweb.com.
Well, the story is based on your real-life experiences growing up in Iran and Austria and France. And is this movie 100% autobiographical, or is this a fictional story inspired by your ordeals growing up?
I think the second thing is better put, because, you know, it's certainly not a documentary about my life. And it's certainly a subjective point of view, and it's certainly that when you make a script, you know, the part of the storytelling, we should never forget it. So if I pretend that is 100% autobiographical, that means that the dog looks like the dog that I draw, that this thing that I said, exactly I said this thing, which is not true. Of course, is a part of storytelling. It's based on my own experiences, and then, you know, you have to make a story. I think even documentaries, they are part fictional. As soon as you make a story, you have to have some fiction. Otherwise, it doesn't work.
Yeah. what inspired you to create the Persepolis graphic novels?
Well, that was really my answer to the words, to the word, because, the two times that I left Iran in 84 and in 94, I heard so many crazy things about my, Iran, people, they were saying things, and I was like, this is not like this is not like that. And, that is a truth, a reality that you see on the TV channel, that I don't say it doesn't exist, it does. But that is many other realities that we never see. So, that was really to say, this, I will give you at least another point of view. It's a very personal one. It just engaged my own person, but this is it. And so that was the beginning, how I started it. And of course, I wrote it 5 years after I left Iran the second time, because I needed to have distance with the story. I didn't have to be angry anymore. I didn't have to have any violence in me anymore, because you cannot answer to the stupidity by stupidity. You cannot answer to the violence by violence. So it's extremely important to take a step back and look at the thing. So that is what I tried to do, and that was the reason I made it in the first place.
Now, how did the graphic novels then turn into a movie?
Well, that was a mess, because I never wanted to do that, and I always thought it was a very bad idea. I still do. That, it's not because you are a good cartoonist that you become a good movie maker, and that's not because something works, as a comic, that it will work as a movie. But knowing that was very good, because I knew the danger of the project, that you shouldn't make an adaptation. We had a transposition. We had to really make an adaptation. That means forgetting about the book, taking the material and turn it into a cinematographic language. But I made it because a friend of mine wanted to become a producer, and and I was like, I want to work with my best friend Vincent, and I want the studio in Paris, and I want this, and I want that, and I want Catherine Deneuve. And he said, yeah, okay. And then I was like, shit, now I have to do it. So that is how it started.
I found this film very insightful in providing a perspective from an everyday Iranian's point of view, which is not common in film. Was that the point, to get a woman's point of view who lives in Iran?
It's not a woman or a man. The fact is that I am a woman. I mean, if I was not a woman, I would be a man. It is a very personal point of view. Since I didn't want that to become a political or historical or sociological statement, I had to write it in my name. I had to put it on my name. It happens that I'm a woman, but it's a human point of view. And really, if there is one message in this movie, is the humanistic message, is that human being anywhere is the same, and they have the right to live, because they have dreams, because they have love, because they have parents and kids, and the life of all of us worth something. And then we have to understand that the situation is not as easy as we think.
There's a bonus surprise here. If you click on it, you'll find out what it is. You're going to be reading why I wrote Persepolis on page 557 to 561, and you're going to complete the Applying Your Skills section on page 562 completely. Some people have been sending partial work. Make sure that you send it completely, but you're not going to send this work today. You're going to hang on to it. Okay? Is that clear, guys?
Yes.
Okay, because you're going to send it together as one work with the work of the next selections. The next selection that you're going to be reading on Friday are Setting the Record Straight and Graphic Novels 101 FAQ. Okay? So make sure that you do today's work, and do not upload it today. You will not be able to upload it.